A lot of people think that an irrevocable trust is a very strict and rigid tool. A lot of times people are scared of it because of that, and they don't understand that there's actually a lot of flexibility that can be baked in or leveraged when setting up your trust. So today I'm going to talk about the 4 top items to include in your irrevocable trust to maximize flexibility. So let's get into it. All right, so the top 4 items to include in your irrevocable trust planning to maximize flexibility. So in general, this whole concept or this idea of maximizing flexibility is going to be centered around what's called a directed trust structure. So as a point of context, directed trust means that you're part and parceling the various responsibilities of the trust to the individuals or entities that are best suited to be able to carry out these responsibilities. You're really finding people that you trust, people that are really good at their jobs, and they have core competencies to carry out these various responsibilities. So the first one I'm going to focus on is actually the trust protector. And the trust protector has a very unique role. And this is probably where the most flexibility comes in into an irrevocable trust. And so the trust protector is an individual, or it can be structured as a committee, but the trust protector is, we'll just say, the person who has the ability to make updates to an irrevocable trust. So think about making updates to provisions because there's been a change in family circumstances, or maybe a beneficiary has developed a drug habit or gotten a divorce. Maybe there's a change in tax laws or asset protection laws. Or maybe there's just no need for the trust any longer. So the trust protector is the one who can go in and update the provisions of the trust to reflect what's going on at that particular time in history. And so they serve a really important role. The point is that you have to include the trust protector provisions in the trust to be able to have this flexibility and make the updates accordingly. I recently did a video about the trust protector role. I suggest watching that because it goes into great length about what the trust protector can and cannot do and really presents the idea in a more holistic way, as opposed to today where we're focusing on the top 4 things. All right, so trust protector is number 1. Number 2 through 4 is related to the part and parceling of the various trustee responsibilities. Now, historically, a trustee is in charge of administering the trust according to the trust terms or provisions, and then also managing any of the assets of the trust. Now, this can be really difficult for someone if they don't have the right education or the right background, or even have the amount of time to be able to devote to something like administering a trust. So it can be really, really complicated. So you want to make sure that you're naming the right people. So with a directed trust structure, you're able to remove certain aspects of the traditional trust role to individuals who are best suited to carry them out. So we'll start with number 2 on our list of 4, and that's the investment advisor. The investment advisor is not necessarily like a wealth manager. It could be, but it can be any person who's capable of managing the assets of the trust. So let's just say that a mom and dad set up a trust for the benefit of their kids. They start funding it with assets during their lifetime. The person setting up the trust could actually name themselves as the investment advisor, so they could retain the control of the assets to decide how they're going to be managed, whether it's a brokerage account or maybe it's even a business, but they can reserve that ability to continue to manage the assets of the trust. All right, so and then that's a huge thing, because a lot of times people, when they start making gifts, they don't want to give up the ability to manage the assets. They don't want someone else, maybe a child or someone else, to manage those assets. So number 2 on our list is the investment advisor. Number 3 is the distribution advisor. So this can be a person or a committee, an entity, who decides when to make distributions to the beneficiaries. So this often could be a very close friend. It could be even perhaps a family member, maybe not an immediate family member who's a beneficiary of the trust. There's different ways to structure this, and depending on whether or not estate tax or asset protection is a concern for you will drive how you set this up. So there's different ways to structure it, but the distribution advisor can have complete discretion to make distributions to the beneficiaries, or you could give them very strict provisions saying when they are allowed to make distributions to the beneficiaries. All right, so that's number 3 on our list, the distribution advisor. So trust protector, investment advisor, distribution advisor. 4th is the administrative trustee. So that's the person in charge of making sure that the trust is being administered according to its terms. So they will take direction from the investment advisor and the distribution advisor. So they don't act without them being told to do so. So when a distribution has to be made, it is the administrative trustee that makes the distribution to the beneficiary, but it's actually the distribution advisor who tells the administrative trustee to make that distribution. Now, you can actually combine these roles. You can combine the distribution advisor and the administrative trustee together. So I've seen that done a lot. I've done that a lot for clients over the years. But bottom line is, this is a deviation from the old trust model where with a traditional trustee, whether it was a trust company or an individual, this, we'll just say a person, was in charge of managing all the assets. So the administrative trustee pulls together, trust accounts, opens bank accounts, prepares tax returns, other tax documents. This is what the administrative trustee exclusively does now, as opposed to with the more traditional trust role, where the trustee is doing not only that administrative piece, but also deciding when to make distributions, and then also managing the assets. I think that managing the assets is probably the biggest deal, because often you don't want a third party managing those assets. So now you have the ability to even part and parcel those. So you could have an investment advisor who's in charge of exclusively managing the brokerage account, and then you have someone else who's in charge of oil and gas interest, and then someone else who's in charge of your ranch interest, and someone else who's in charge of an actual operating business. But you can part and parcel all of these responsibilities. Now you're choosing the best of the best to make sure that your assets and your legacy and the intent that you originally had is being carried out over time. All right, so trust protector, investment advisor, distribution advisor, and then lastly, the administrative trustee. Now, before I close out here, I want to add one last thing. Not all states have the same laws around these various things that I just mentioned, the 4 things that I mentioned in this video. Some states don't have any laws around these 4 things. That doesn't mean that you can't use these 4 items in your irrevocable trust planning to maximize flexibility, but it does mean that you are potentially opening yourself and the individuals to serve in these roles to a lot of legal scrutiny, legal risk, possibility of a lot of liability. And because of that, you may not want to do that type of structure in your jurisdiction. Now, the solution to that is to go to a jurisdiction that does offer that kind of planning. Those kind of laws are very, very well defined. So again, South Dakota, you hear me talk about South Dakota all the time. Nevada has very good directed trust laws as well. And so, and to take advantage of trust laws in those jurisdictions, you need a trustee in those jurisdictions. So, and the way that works, a lot of times people don't know an individual in those jurisdictions, so they'll hire an administrative trust company, and that trust company exists purely to be able to do the administrative function. Unlike a traditional trust company, they are not managing assets, so often they have different fee structures than your typical traditional trust company. So they can be a lot cheaper and allow you to hire the other individuals or entities that you want managing your assets, making distributions, etc. So this is the way to really handpick the professionals or family members or trusted friends and advisors that you think are going to carry out your intent and make sure that the assets are being preserved over time. So top 4 things to make sure that you're maximizing flexibility with your irrevocable trust.